Good.
Yeah, she's doing great. Not going out a whole lot, but that's all right. We're keeping her safe.
Good.
You doing all right?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
And we're ready to start.
Good morning.
The Kabbalah Cafe, lesson 296. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Hope everyone's having a wonderful weekend, had a beautiful Shabbat. Someone recently posted that their wife receives a package from Amazon or multiple packages every day. And so one day there was no packages, and the Amazon delivery man knocked on the door to make sure everyone was okay. So we are a society of consumers, and much of our economy runs around that consumption. We should also be consumers of spirituality. We should think about whether or not we're getting our daily dose of spirituality. Every day, the soul needs, just like you need physical food to keep your body healthy and to give you the energy, so too your soul needs every single day. It needs spiritual energy, otherwise it loses inspiration. So it's important that we are continuously receiving spiritual packages. Every day, if possible, we should be receiving spiritual packages, things that can help us in our spiritual journey. So today, for your spiritual package of today, we have the Kabbalah Cafe. And today we're going to talk about different kinds of actions that we are told to do, or we are traditionally that we do as Jewish people, where we call these actions mitzvot. Mitzvot are literally, the literal translation of commandments. We have commandments in the Torah. There are a certain amount of commandments. God gives us, we're told 613 commandments. It's interesting that there are many different opinions, of course, that's what you would expect, about what exactly that number 613 contains. There are different opinions about that, but all rabbinical sources and all Jewish sources agree on that number, that their number is 613 commandments. Of course, you've got the 10 commandments at Mount Sinai and all the other commandments, which in total is the 613 commandments. And generally speaking, and interesting to note, that in the Kabbalah, it says that the word mitzvah has another meaning. Not only does the word mean commandment, it also means, the other meaning of the word is, it also means connection. That based on the understanding of the word, it also means connection, which means that a mitzvah is not just a commandment, it's a way to connect. And the truth of the matter is, if you think about it, when someone asks you to do something and you do that for them, what happens at that time? You've made a connection. You have now a relationship with that person. You are now connected to that person. The person asked you to do something, you've done it. You now have a connection, you have a relationship. It's an opportunity to be connected. If this person is a very, very important person and a very significant person, and you have a lot of respect and a lot of awe for this person, and the person says, hey, could you do me a favor? And they ask you to do something, you feel honored by the opportunity to do something for that person and to have that, the ability to have that relationship. So in Kabbalah, it says that we have to look at mitzvahs as connections, an opportunity for connection, relationship. And that would explain, and again, this is just parenthetically, this would explain the famous teaching that says, what is the reward for a mitzvah? We talk about doing commandments. What is the reward for a commandment? So the ethics of our father says the reward for a commandment is the commandment. Now, conventionally, why would that make any sense? I have a commandment to do. Why is the reward the commandment? The reward is what I get if I do the commandment. But if we understand, in other words, when a person has a job, I do my job, and then I get rewarded by getting paid. I get my salary, I get paid, I get something, compensation. How could we say that the reward of the job is the job? But in this case, we're saying that every mitzvah is an opportunity to connect, to have a relationship. And if you ask someone, what is the reward for being in a loving relationship. What's the reward? Being in the loving relationship. That's the reward. I don't need a reward because that is the reward. The reward is, if you ask someone, what's the reward for getting to play with your grandchildren? Right? What's the reward for that? The reward is the playing with my grandchildren. That is the reward. There's nothing more rewarding than that. So when we talk about a mitzvah and we understand it from the Kabbalist paradigm, that a mitzvah is really a opportunity for a relationship. It's a connecting thing. It's something that we do to connect. When we understand it from that perspective, we understand that a mitzvah is the reward itself. I'm going to get a chair, so I think Rivka wants to join our class this morning. So I'm just gonna grab her a chair so she can be a part of it. One moment, sorry.
Rivka, we're so glad you're joining the class.
Yep, here.
Hi, Rivka. Good to see you.
She wants to lay down on me. Okay. So, yeah, there we go. Now, so that is when we talk about commandments, conventionally, we say that there are three general categories, three general groups of mitzvot, of commandments. They are, I'll give the Hebrew name and then the English name. One is called mishpatim. Mishpatim are the logical, rational mitzvahs. The mitzvahs that are like the civil laws of Judaism. Thou shalt not steal. What happens if you do steal? You shall not damage someone else's property. What happens when you damage someone else's property? These are logical, rational mitzvahs that all of us understand, and we wouldn't necessarily need the Torah to come to. Many civilizations, without a Torah, without religion, come to the understanding that there is a certain rational, logical approach to laws, that there are laws that make sense for a functional society, for society to function. We need to have certain logical, rational laws, and every society shares those. We can, of course, have nuances and differences and debate, but the basis of the idea of rational civil laws, we share that with every society, and Judaism has many mitzvahs that are rational, logical laws. Then we have a set of commandments, which are the supra-rational laws, chukim. Chukim are mitzvahs that don't have any necessarily logical, rational reason that we can easily understand, at least. They are just, this is the law of the Torah. This is what God wants. This is the law of the Torah. There are multiple examples of this. One of them, for example, is that it says one shall not have in their clothing wool and linen together. Wool and linen is not supposed to be in your clothes together. You're not supposed to have clothes made of wool and linen together. Is there any reason for that? Does that affect the world in a moral way? Is there anything ethical about that? No, we don't understand anything moral, ethical about it. We may start finding things in Kabbalah, deeper secrets, but on a simple level, this is a super rational law. When you ask a Jew, why are you doing this? His answer is because God said so. I don't know. This is what God said. By the way, interesting to note, because it is something that a lot of people misunderstand, that the kosher laws, the laws of kosher, the kosher dietary laws, fall into that category officially. In the official categorization of mitzvahs, kosher laws are not one of those laws that we assume are categorized as the rational laws, but totally super rational. Again, there's lots of interesting theories and interesting thoughts and ideas and concepts that are spoken about, but essentially, we do kosher because this is what God said. So this is what God said. So again, we have the supra-rational laws. So we have the rational laws, the mishpatim, which are many of the civil laws, laws that just have a logic and make sense. And we share that with every society. Then we have the chukim, the supra-rational laws that are only in Judaism. You're not going to find in American law somewhere, don't wear clothes with the wool and linen together. That would make no sense. Why? Why would you do that? What's the purpose of that? There's no reason for it. But in Judaism, you have those types of laws. And then there is another third type, which are an interesting combination, really. And these are the laws are called edut, which are testimonial laws. And these are laws that are there as symbols, as testimonies. They give testimony to something. For example, keeping Shabbat. Keeping Shabbat is a testimony because it's there as a sign to remind us, to bear testimony to the fact that God created the world in 6 days and he rested on the seventh day. So many of our, for example, our holidays are symbolic, they're testimonial, they are a sign or a symbol to remind us of certain things. We celebrate Passover. Passover is not necessarily a civil rational law. It is more religious in nature, but it's not totally super rational either. Once we know the law, we understand the meaning behind it. It's to remind us of a historical event. God took the Jews out of Egypt. We need to commemorate this, and we do certain things to commemorate it. We have matzah, we have a seder, and so on and so forth. Certain mitzvahs that are there as a sign, as a symbol. They're symbolic. They remind us of certain thing. One of them is interesting, is the mezuzah. The mezuzah is a mitzvah that has symbolic meaning. It's there to remind us as we walk into a room that there is a God, that we remember the Shema written inside the mezuzah scroll, and we walk into the room, we say, 1 second, there is a God. So when I walk into this room, I have to ask myself, am I here just to fulfill my own needs, or is there something positive that I can do in fulfilling a mission, a higher purpose? It might change the approach we take to what we say to someone when we walk into a room. I might walk in the room and say something angry to that person, or catch myself at the doorway when I touch the mezuzah and say, 1 second, hold on, there's a God. Everything I do should have meaning and purpose, and I'm answerable to a higher calling. What would be the right thing to say? What would be the right thing to do as I walk into the room? So again, would American law, would other laws come up with mezuzah? No. It's not necessarily something that other laws, other societies would come up with, unlike the civil laws. But at the same time, once Judaism introduces them, we do understand the meaning behind it. We understand that they bear testimony. They have symbolic meaning. They're not totally super rational. It's not like not having wool and linen in your clothes when someone asks you why, and you would just shrug your shoulders because God said so. That's why. Mezuzah, we say, well, no, I understand. There's meaning behind this. There's deeper meaning. That this is a testimony. That's why they're called testimonial mitzvahs. This bears testimony to something. This is a sign. This is symbolic. I understand and appreciate it. So it may not be something that I would have figured out on my own, but now that God has introduced it, it does have some sense. So again, these are the three categories, generally speaking, when we talk about the 613 commandments, the ones that are totally rational, totally make sense, do not kill, do not steal, civil laws, and so on and so forth. And we share that with every society. Then you have laws that are totally super rational. They have no meaning or sense at all. They have no significance that we can understand at all. Don't mix the wool and linen, and so on and so forth. Many laws in the Torah, the red heifer, and other laws that if you ask someone, what's the reason? Because God said so. That's why we do it. We do it because God said so. And then the third ones, which are the testimonial ones, which we would not have necessarily figured out on our own, but now that God has given it to us, we understand that they bear testimony. They are a sign. They're symbolic of something. They remind us of something. So there is a sense we understand why we're doing them because of what they remind us and what they bring us to, and so on and so forth. Shabbat would go into that category. So we have three general categories of mitzvahs. In Kabbalah, when we start getting into the Kabbalistic teachings, it says that these three types, these three categories of commandments actually are associated with three different levels of God. When we talk about God, we can generally speak about three different levels, three different layers. There is God as he is in our world. God as he is in our world, because we live in a world which is vibrant, which is alive. It's a soul that it is a world that has a soul, just like the human body has a soul, which gives it vibrancy and life. So too the world has a life to it. It has an energy. Nature has an energy and a life to it. It's a world that's alive. It's a world that's beating. It's a world that has energy to it. That energy is godly energy. It's godly energy as it is contained and within our world. So you can look around the world and see an amazing world, right? Or anyone who's ever witnessed the birth of a child, and you say, wow, that is a miracle. That is a miracle. There are miracles around us all the time. You don't have to be that deep and spiritual to notice that there's a God behind nature. There's a God in our world. As we've said many times before, the word in Hebrew for nature and one of the names of God have the same numerical value. Elohim and Teva and nature, HaTeva, the nature, they have the same numerical value because nature is basically another name for God. It's God as he is anonymous in our world, God as he's concealed in our world, but it's godly energy. So there's God as he is in our world. He fills our world. He's around us all the time. He's within our world. That level of God, of course, is a finite level of God because this is a finite world. We live in a world of time and space with limitations. This is a finite universe and a finite world. And so if the God is within this world, this must be a finite aspect of God, God as he is within creation. Then we obviously understand God cannot be that, only that. God cannot be a finite being. God must also have the ability to transcend these limitations. So logic dictates that even though we don't see it and don't sense it, there's got to be a God that is beyond our world. God is not just what he is in this world. God has also got to be beyond this world. He created the world. He made this finite reality. So he himself must transcend it. And so we speak about God as he transcends our world, as he is above our world. So God is within our world, but God is also above. He transcends creation. He's not defined by creation. He's not only within creation. He's also outside of creation too. There is an aspect of God that transcends creation. And that is something that we could come to a logical, rational understanding. That's something we can come to a rational conclusion of, because if we know and we become aware of God within the world, we look around the world and say, wow, there's just got to be a God that makes all of this amazing universe be and continue to be. We can also come to the conclusion that though I don't know what it is, there must be some aspect of God that also transcends all of this, that created all of this, it's beyond all of this. What we might not come to the conclusion on our own, at least, is that there's one more level. There's another level. Not only is there God as he is in our universe, not only is there God as he transcends our universe, but Kabbalah tells us that and introduces us to a novel idea. There is a third level of God. And the third level of God is the essence of God. That God, not as he is in our world, not as he transcends our world. It's neither. It's the essence of God. And the essence of God is everything. It can be within, it can be without. It has no limitations and definitions of all, because when we talk about those first two levels of God, we are defining them in some way. One is that there's God as he is within our world. That's the definition of the first level. The definition of the higher infinite level of God as he transcends is that he's defined to transcending. He's defined to not being in our world. He's defined to being limitless and infinite beyond our world. So that is the definition of that level of God. And then there's a level of God that has no definition at all. It's not out, it's not in, there is no definition. It can be anything. It is everything and it is everywhere. It is the very essence of God. And the very essence of God, again, is beyond limitation. So says Kabbalah, when we talk about three categories of commandments, it's because they're associated with and come from these three different levels. When we talk about God as he is in our world, that's God that is finite, that is limited, that we can relate to, that we can connect with. That is where the mitzvahs, that is associated with the commandments that are rational, that make sense, that are within our reality. It's something that we can relate to. We understand that. Do not kill. Do not take something from someone else. If you damage someone else's property, you should be held responsible. These are things that human beings with our minds, limited minds, can comprehend. We understand it. It makes sense to us. That is God's wisdom as it is within our world, within our reality. So that is the source, so to speak, or the association is that is God as he is within our creation. That is one level, God as he is within our world, within our creation. And the mitzvahs, therefore, associated with that are the mitzvahs, the civil laws, the rational laws, okay? Then we deal with the next level, which is God as he transcends our world. God as he transcends our world is beyond our understanding. It's infinite. We don't understand the infinite. Our minds are finite. And the commandments that are associated with that are the supra-rational commandments, the commandments that are beyond our understanding. So there's a mitzvah, again, as we said earlier, do not mix wool and linen in your clothing together. I don't understand any moral or ethical value in that. I don't see how that makes the world a better place. I don't see how that makes me a better person. I don't understand the point of it. But this is God's will. This is God's will. It is beyond rationale. It's beyond something that we can understand. It's not even on some level, it's not even that we aren't smart enough. It's just beyond the concept of mind and intellect. It's beyond rationale. It's supra-rational. It comes from a place that is beyond understanding. And so this is the level of God as he transcends creation. And then we get into the essence of God. The essence of God is simultaneously can be finite and infinite at the same time, right? It is both finite and infinite. God is, in his essence, can be finite, he can be infinite, he can be both. He has the ability to have all of those. And therefore, we have a third category of commandments, which combine the two. On the one hand, they're not things that we would figure out on our own. We don't share them necessarily with other societies, right? Though other societies and other religions have taken certain aspects of these things, for example, the Sabbath and so on and so forth. But these are things that man did not come to on their own. This was a revelation from above. These are commandments that had to be given to us. So there is a supra-rational aspect to them. But yet, once we have these commandments, they do have some rationale to them. They do make sense to us. We can say, oh, I get the point. I see the meaning for Shabbat. I understand that this is these symbolic meanings and why it's important for us to have these symbolic meanings in these commandments. So there is also the concept of a certain commandments that combine both the super rational and the rational, and these represent the essence of God. And it's interesting because when we say that these mitzvahs are called testimonial mitzvahs, when witnesses have to bear testimony, they don't have to bear testimony about something that is readily apparent, right? We don't need witnesses to come to court to tell us there's a sun in the sky. I don't need witnesses for that. We can look up and see it ourselves. Why do you need witnesses? You need witnesses to give testimony to something that we would not know without them. Without them, we would not know this idea. Even when we have something that is not readily apparent, but it's going to become apparent. It will come, this information will come out. I also don't need testimony for it. I can just wait for the information to come out. I can infer the information. Even if it's not obvious, I can infer the information and come to this conclusion. When do you need testimony? When you're dealing with something that no one else can know. Only the witnesses can share this with us. And that's what we talk about, the essence of God, because God as he is within our world, we can figure that out ourselves. The fact that there is a transcendent God that's beyond that, we can also infer that. We can infer if there's God as he is in this world, we can infer there's God as he transcends this world. But the idea that there's an essence of God that transcends both of those, that's something that the Torah and Judaism and these commandments bear testimony to. They reveal this to us. They help us come to this conclusion. So again, we talk about God in the world, God as he transcends the world, God, the essence of God, that is neither one of those two, is just beyond all of that. And that's why we have three categories of commandments: the rational laws associated with God as he is in our world, the super rational commandments corresponds to God as he is beyond our creation, and then the testimonial commandments that combine really both the rational and the super rational together. That's the essence of God, and that's what the Kabbalah tells us. Now, the Kabbalah explains that really, in each of the three, you have all three aspects. In other words, like this, what it says is that all the commandments, where do they start? They all start from the essence of God. And ultimately, they all come down into our world. So all of them have all three aspects of some aspects that are totally not rational or super rational, that are just connected to the essence of God. In every commandment, there are certain aspects of it that are really super rational. And in every commandment, there's also aspects of it that are totally rational as well. And even, in other words, even the super rational mitzvahs, if we dig deep enough, we can find some meaning or symbolic meaning behind it. There's some kind of spiritual meaning behind it as well. Because really, in every commandment, you have all three. The reason why we have three categories is because in each of these three, certain aspects of it are more emphasized, are more expressed. So in the supra-rational mitzvahs, the major aspect of the mitzvah, what you see mostly, what is most expressed, is its super-rational identity. And in the rational mitzvahs, what's most expressed is its rational identity. But really, they all have all three, because they all come from the same place and come down into the same place. They all start from the essence of God and eventually all make their way down into this world. So those are the three categories. As far as how this affects us and how what this means in our service and how we behave. Generally speaking, this calls out in us two different ways in which we approach Judaism, in which we approach commandments, two different general ways. What are those general? I'm going to take a moment just to stop for questions. If anyone has questions before we go on, if anyone have any questions, anyone wants to clarify anything.
I have, Rabbi, it's Marilyn.
I'm listening, Mary.
Third level, the essence of God, you said that there's a need for testimony
Yes.
that combines the rational and the super rational. Can you give me an example of what that testimony would be?
So the testimony is the two things. Testimony, what I mean by that is a testimony that reminds us that there is an essence of God, that reveals that to us. That tells us that you should know, not only is there a God in nature, not only is there a God as he is above nature, there's something else. There's the essence of God. And for that, we need commandments that remind us of that concept, that idea that there is the essence of God. What are those commandments? Those are the commandments that are both rational and super rational at the same time. There are aspects of them that are totally super rational and aspects of them that are rational. And it's a combination of those two that tell us that there's a God that is neither rational or super rational, that supersedes both of those. The commandments generally that fall in that category are commandments like Shabbat and holidays and mezuzah and tefillin, mitzvahs that we're told that are there as symbolic signs that tell us something else, remind us of something else. They bear testimony to something else. Those are generally the commandments that are associated with that.
Thank you.
Okay. So I'm gonna mute at this time, and then we'll take more questions. We'll take more questions later. Just getting a little bit of feedback sound, so we'll mute and we'll open up soon again. Okay. So continuing on, generally the fact that we have these different categories, what it means to us is that when we approach commandments in any of these categories, because remember, all three categories contain aspects of the other two, they all have all the aspects, is when we approach commandments, we approach them with two different approaches. On the one hand, one approach it has to be that this is not about what I understand, this is not about what I appreciate, these are the laws of God, and whether I understand them or not, or appreciate them or not, I say to God, I'm here to serve. I'm here to serve, I'm here to fulfill your will. It's not about what I understand and what I feel. It's about accepting and being the yoke of God, so to speak, accepting God's sovereignty and saying, God, if this is your will, I'm here to serve. And it's not conditional on how much I understand and how much I appreciate, right? We always say, if you go to God and say, I'm only going to do the commandments which make sense to me and feel good to me and make me excited, or I get spiritual, makes me feel spiritual, it's basically like saying to a spouse, honey, I will do anything for you as long as I like it and it makes sense to me and it makes me feel good. What that basically means is that you're here to serve yourself. You're here for yourself. You're here to do what makes you feel good, what you understand. So on the one hand, there has to be, on the one hand, so there has to be this, so to speak, unconditional acceptance that God is God, I'm here to serve, and I say to God, whatever it is, whatever your will is, whatever you want me to do, and it really is not relevant what I understand, what I don't understand, I'm here to serve. That is one aspect, and that is associated again with the super rational aspects of mitzvahs, because we don't understand them. So why are you doing them? Because God, you said so. So there's that aspect. At the same time, Judaism says that as much as we can, we're supposed to work on trying to understand the commandments, the meaning behind them, learn, understand, and fulfill them coming from a place of understanding and appreciation and passion. And that's because there are aspects of mitzvahs that do make sense, that are rational, that if we study them, we can come to appreciate them, can come to see the value in them, and can come to a place where we say, you know what, I feel this is important. I'm passionate about this. I buy into this because this makes sense to me. And I'm not just doing it because God said so. I'm doing it because I think it's the right thing. I'm excited about this. I feel it's right. I'm passionate about this concept. It makes sense to me. So, and that is another aspect of the way we approach mitzvahs. And in every mitzvah, every time we fulfill a commandment, we're actually supposed to be approaching it from both aspects. On the one hand, there's a part of us that's supposed to be saying, it really makes no difference what I understand or don't understand. God, if this is what you want, I'm here, I'm yours, unconditional, I'm committed, I'm in, I'm yours. On the other hand, we have to be looking to see how much of this can I understand, how much of this can I appreciate, how much of this can I digest and internalize, make a part of myself, and thereby be passionate about it and do it from that place. So it's actually expressed this two-track system. These two tracks are expressed in the famous statement, the iconic statement of the Jewish people when God asked them, do you want to receive the Torah? And they responded, Naaseh v'nishma, which means we will do, and then nishma, we will hear, we will understand. Which, in other words, first they said, God, we will do it. Not only once we understand it. First, we're going to do it, no matter what. We're yours. So we're committed. We're in, unconditional. Naaseh, we're here to do. But they don't just end with that. There's another piece, and they say, Vinishma, and we will understand it. We will work on understanding it, learning it, internalizing it, making a part of us. So from the very beginning, from when the Jews received the Torah on Mount Sinai, it was understood that being Jewish and fulfilling our moral and spiritual obligations requires a two-track system simultaneously. We're almost living in two contradictory realities. We've, on the one hand, got to put our mind aside and say, God, it's got nothing to do with what I understand. I'm yours. If you ask me to chop trees, I'll chop trees. You ask me to whatever you want, whatever makes you happy, God. We are here to serve unconditionally. So we're running on that track. And then simultaneously, we're saying, well, what does this mitzvah mean? How do I can relate to this? How is this meaningful to me? What does this mean to me? How do I connect with this? What is it? How do I connect with this intellectually and thereby emotionally and thereby be enthused and excited and passionate about this because it's something I appreciate? So we're working on both of these tracks simultaneously all the time. The question that we want to address today is, if the goal is great spiritual, if the goal is greater spiritual heights, to become more connected to God and to be more spiritual, it would seem of those two, which would be the one track that would be more spiritual and a deeper relationship with God? It would seem that the one in which we say we're unconditionally yours, God, is the more selfless and the more, so to speak, a deeper relationship and commitment. As I said earlier, it's got nothing to do with what I understand, what I know. It's got nothing to do with what makes me feel good. This is about you, God. I put myself aside. I've become selfless. I'm here to serve. It's not about what I get and not what I understand. It's not conditional on anything. It would seem that when we talk about when we talk about commitments and we talk about relationship, it would seem that mitzvahs from an unconditional, it really is not relevant how much I understand or what I understand. I'm here to serve. Coming from that perspective would seem to be a higher spiritual and a deeper expression of our commitment to God. So the question is, why is there within Judaism, and what is the purpose of there being this other aspect of our understanding and the track in which we endeavor to try to understand as much as we can? Maybe it would be better not to understand or not to endeavor to understand, but just to say, God, we're here to serve. We're yours. It really makes no difference what we understand. We're going to do it anyways because we know we're here to serve. We're here for you. So question that we have is, what is the purpose what is the purpose, or what is the reason for this other track that we have as well? And again, especially if the goal is to become more selfless, why is it that we have commandments that focus on the rational making sense of things? And why do we have the track in which the focus is how much I understand? So Kabbalah says, and this is the key to understanding all of Kabbalah in many ways, and understanding Judaism, that we have to understand that the goal of Judaism is not to transcend. It's not to escape and transcend and be as spiritual as we can be. I know that doesn't sound right, but let's give this a moment. The goal isn't to be as spiritual beings as we can be. In a lot of different theologies and a lot of different isms and a lot of different Eastern disciplines and many other things that people follow or explore in life, the goal is to transcend. How you can become the most spiritual being possible. And if that's the goal, yes, the goal would be best fulfilled with transcending your understanding, transcending your emotions, and saying to God, it's not about, I'm totally selfless, I'm totally here to serve. I put my mind and heart aside for you. That would accomplish that goal in the greatest way. However, in Judaism, that is not the goal. Kabbalah says, logically, if that was the goal, then why would God put the soul into this world? This world is a place in which no matter how spiritual the soul will become, it'll never be as spiritual as it was before it comes into this world or after it leaves this world. Because when you're dealing with a material world in a material body, there are limitations on how spiritual and how selfless you can become. There are just limitations that do not exist when the soul is not in this world. So why would God say the goal in this world is to become spiritual if it can be much more spiritual not being in this world? So Kabbalah says the goal is not to transcend, the goal is to transform. What does it mean to transform? God made a material world. God gave you a physical body. God gave you a limited mind and a limited heart. And his goal for you is not to transcend those limitations, but to transform those limitations, to uplift the world, to transform the world. And if you're going to transform a person, you can't tell them that the way you're going to change as a human being is by putting your mind and your heart aside and just doing what I tell you to do. That might be very spiritual, and that might be very altruistic and very lofty, but that person's mind and that person's heart has not changed. They don't think differently and they don't feel differently. They're overriding their thinking and feeling and saying, no matter what I think and no matter what I feel, I'm just going to do the right thing, which is very lofty and very spiritual, but their minds and their hearts remain unchanged. Judaism says the goal is we want your mind to think differently and we want your heart to feel differently. And for your mind to think differently and your heart to feel differently, the only way to do that is to learn, understand, and then translate that understanding into the way we feel. And if we do not do that, then we're escaping our limitations, but we're not transforming our limitations. So Kabbalah says it's important to understand that if we approached commandments from a seemingly very altruistic approach of, I don't need to understand. It's not important. I just have to do what God wants and can totally dedicate myself and transcend my thoughts and my feelings. That is very lofty. It's very spiritual. There's no question. It is more spiritual than the other approach. It's more selfless than the other approach. It is. But it is definitely not in any way going to transform and change who you are as an individual. You're not a changed person. You're not thinking differently. Your mind doesn't see the world differently. Your mind, there hasn't been a paradigm shift in the way you think and the way you feel. You're an unchanged person. You're very spiritual, very lofty, and very selfless, but your mind and your heart are not working differently. The only way to get your mind and heart to work differently is to understand things and to translate those understandings into emotions, into feelings. It's less lofty, it's less spiritual, it's more self-involved, there's no question, but it is ultimately, that is the purpose, to transform. So now, let me stop and see if there's any questions on this point, and then we'll finish with the last piece of this. So let me unmute, give me a moment here.
I have a question.
Hey, yes, questions.
So when I hear people say, I just give my complete will up to God, and
Yeah.
whatever his will is mine.
Yeah.
That's more of a transcendence thing. It's
Correct.
not really a physically active thing. It's a passive thing. Is that what you're talking about?
I'm not saying it's passive versus active. I'm not focusing on that aspect, but I am saying that that the concept that when a person just says whatever the will, whatever God has in mind for me, and whatever His will is a beautiful thing, and Judaism prescribes to that. But it says that's not enough, because that's saying it makes no difference what I understand, it makes no difference what I feel. I'm yours. God, I'm here to serve. I'm just totally here to serve. That is wonderful. And Judaism says that needs to be a part of the recipe, but it can't stop there. And it can't be the goal. The goal ultimately has to be that you are thinking and feeling differently. And the only way to do that is to learn and understand why does God command this? What is the meaning behind it?
Okay.
Why are we doing a Passover Seder 3,000 years after the Jews left Egypt? I mean, why? It's 3,000 years ago. Why are we still eating matzah? I mean, can't we update this? And what are we doing this for? What does it mean in my life? How does it relate to me? When I understand that, it begins to change the way I think. It begins to change the way I feel. I'm now a different person. I'm a transformed person. It's not as holy. It's still more about I have to understand. I have to feel. It's based on my understanding, based on my feelings. It has its limits, but it's about a transformation. It's about not overriding. It's a little bit like, we talk about two ways of teaching. Sometimes you could just flood the student with information, like frontal teaching, where you just give the student a lot of information, they take notes and just take that in, which is you accomplish a lot more and you can achieve a lot more information. But if you really want to transform a child, they have to learn it themselves, and it has to come from themselves. And it's a lot less. They're not going to accomplish as much. They're not going to cover as much material. But we're dealing with transformation. We want to change the way the child thinks. We want to teach the child how to think, how to become a learner, how to become a lifelong learner. That requires transformation. And so again, that's what we're saying over here is that it's not good enough to just come to God every day and say, yes, sir, I'm here to, I'm here to serve whatever you say. I'm here, you're the boss, and I'm unconditionally and committed. That's not enough. Judaism says that's a part of it, but that's not enough. Okay. Any other questions so far?
Rabbi?
Yes.
So if one is trying to become a more godly soul, what level is that?
If you're trying to become more godly, so the question is like this: to become more godly means ultimately to say, God, I want to fulfill your will. Which means that when we say we want to become more godly, it can be a very self-oriented want, in the sense that we could say, I want to feel closer to God. I want to feel more spiritual. I want to feel that my life is more spiritual, which is wonderful. But then there's something more, which is, I want to know, God, what do you want? What do you want? What makes you feel good? And the things that makes God feel good isn't always the things that make us feel good. So it's just like in a marriage, it's not always the things that makes our spouse happy is the things that makes me feel good. But that's part of what a relationship is about, is saying, I want to know what you want. And God says, you know what I want? I want you to be transformed. I want you to understand. I want you to feel. I want you to not just be a robot that is an angelic robot that just says, it makes no difference what I think or feel. I'm just here to serve you, God. That might feel very spiritual, and that might feel very holy and feel very transcendent, but God says, that's not my will. That's not why I created the world. What I created was, I want you to become different. And for you to become different, you've got to learn, you've got to feel, and it's a little bit more self-involved. But ultimately, when we say what is more godly is to know and to be committed to God's goals. Not what makes us feel good or what makes us feel spiritual, but what is his purpose? What is his spiritual journeys can also be very, very self-involved. I don't know if you know this, but sometimes when a person's on a spiritual journey, they're so focused on my spiritual state of being, what am I doing to be more spiritual, that itself can be very self-consuming. Sometimes it's about saying, I want to know, God, tell me, what's your goal? What do you want out of this? And how do I achieve that goal, no matter how I feel about it, and no matter how...
Ben, your wallet was right near the door.
Okay, so let me just mute, and then we're going to go on, and we'll take more questions in a moment.
Huh?
Okay, so just one last piece of this class. What we've achieved so far is explained that there are different categories of mitzvahs, 3 different categories, 3 different levels of God. We'll see this all on the review sheet at the end. We've also come to the conclusion that these 3 manifest themselves in two ways, two tracks in which we approach Judaism. And one in which we say, it's not about what I understand, it's not about what I know, it's not what I feel, it's God, it's your will, I transcend myself. And on the other hand, another track that says, no, it is, I need to understand, and I need to know, and I need to feel, and I need to internalize it. And that is another track, and we work on both of these tracks simultaneously. And we ask the question, why is that second track important? If seemingly the goal is to be spiritual and just to transcend ourselves, wouldn't the first one achieve that? And we answer that the goal is not necessarily to escape, to transcend our reality, it's to transform our reality. Transcending our reality means escaping me. Escaping me means I put my mind and heart aside and I say, God, I'm yours. That's escaping me. Transcending myself, which is a beautiful thing. It's a very, and Judaism says you got to do that too. That's one of the tracks, but that's not enough. God says, I don't want you just to escape yourself. I want you to transform yourself. And transformation requires understanding, knowing something, feeling it, being a part. God says, I want you to be a partner in my creation. If you don't understand what God's will is, if you don't understand the meaning behind what we do, and you just do it mindlessly as a servant of God, that is very nice, but you're not a partner with God. You're an employee, you're a 9 to 5. You're just like, okay, tell me what to do and I'll do it. I do whatever you want, but that's a 9 to 5 employee. God says, no, I want partners. I want people who care about the things I care about, that are passionate about things I'm passionate about, because I want transformed beings. I want people who understand and feel. And it may seem a little bit more self, and it's not as spiritually high. You can't get the same spiritual high with this approach, but it is the ultimate goal, is the transformation. So now, this is the last piece of this. Then what begs the question, if that's the case, if the whole goal is transformation, then why is there transcendence part of this? Why is there the track that says, put your mind away, put your thoughts and feelings away, and just do what you're supposed to do, which we said is a simultaneous track? That's the other track. If the goal is to transform, and the focus is on understanding and feeling, why does there need to be the other track in which we say, it's not about your thoughts, it's not about your feelings, put that all aside, just be committed, say, God, yes, sir, whatever you want. Why do we need that aspect? Why is that track needed if the goal is to transform? And the answer to that is because if we're not working simultaneously on transcending, then we become a little bit self-involved. And what happens is that instead of becoming a solution to the problem, we become part of the problem. Instead of being able to transform the world, we become part of the world. In other words, we have to simultaneously, on the one hand, focus on it's not I, transcending self, and being totally committed to God unconditionally. And because we have that, we remain committed to the goal, which is to transform ourselves, to make ourselves better. How do we do that? By understanding and by feeling. In other words, if not for that track of transcendence, if not for the track of it's not about myself, and it makes no difference what I think and feel, I'm totally committed, the unconditional commitment, which is the more spiritual, lofty, altruistic aspect. If we take that out of the ingredients, if we take that out of the recipe, if that gets moved out, what might happen and what does happen is we become so self-involved, and we become so engaged in ourselves and the material world around us, that ultimately we become not a solution to the problem, we become part of the problem. Just to explain this a little bit more, give an example. We generally say that the 6 days of the week is the time in which we work on transforming the world. That's why we engage in the world. We're in business, we're in commerce, we're in the world. We are engaged in the reality in the world. That we do 6 days a week. What do we do on Shabbat? What do we do on the 7th day? We transcend the world. We say no work, no commerce, no cell phones, no email, just leave the world alone, stay away. We transcend and we reconnect with God. Now, which is the more spiritual day? Shabbat, the 7th day, that's the more spiritual day. What is the day in which we fulfill the purpose of creation? The purpose of creation is fulfilled in the 6 days of the week, because that's when you're transforming the world. That's when you're elevating the world. So question then becomes, if that's the goal, why do we need Shabbat? Just have 7 days of work to transform the world, if that's the goal. Why are we taking a day off from fulfilling our goal? And the answer is because if we don't have a Shabbat to reconnect, to remind us of who we are and why we're here, which means to transcend, then what can happen is that we become not a solution. We become not a light to the world. We become part of its darkness because we get consumed by the world. We lose our identity because if we never stop to remember, who are we? Where do we come from? Why are we here? And transcend our work of transformation. If we never take that break, then we can easily lose our sense of purpose, our sense of higher meaning, our sense of why we're here and what we're here to do. So we have to balance both of these things at the same time. We have the ultimate goal, what we're trying to achieve in this world, and at the same time, we need the inspiration to do that. We need the inspiration to fulfill that goal. And so that's what these two tracks do. The track that says you have to understand and you have to try to feel and connect with the mitzvahs is the track that says it's about transforming who you are. And that's the goal. That is the goal. But at the same time, in order to keep us focused on that goal and to help us keep us on the straight and narrow, so to speak, to help us keep focused on that goal so we don't lose our sense of goal and purpose and we don't become consumed with the very world we're trying to transform. We don't become totally consumed by this self that we're involved with in trying to understand. I have to understand, I have to feel, and then we lose that sense of selfless commitment to the goal. So there also needs to be transcendence in which we say, you know what, put all that self aside. Well, put out all that self focus aside, your understanding, your emotions. It's not about that. Transcend that. And that keeps us focused, that keeps us goal-oriented, that keeps us, reminds us, yes, total selflessness, I'm committed to you, to God, unconditionally, and therefore what I care about is your goal. What's your goal? Transform, understand, feel, work on yourself. So it's both of those together, just like you have a Shabbat and the week. You have high holidays and the rest of the year. One is where you fulfill the goal. The other one is that gives you the inspiration to fulfill the goal. One is the goal, is driving the car. The other one is getting the gas to fuel the car. The same thing is here too. The car, the goal is transformation, changing who we are. The fuel to do that is the transcendence, is the spiritual transcendence. When we put ourselves aside, that's the fuel that helps us. So you need to transcend in order to transform. If you don't transcend, you can't transform because you're in the problem. You're not above the problem. You need to go up and transcend, then you can come down to fix the problem. And this is this kind of connects a little bit to what we talk about in Kabbalah. You know, so we have to go up and then we come down. We go up and we go down. We go up to transcend this world, to connect to God above this world. But then we come, in order to be inspired to come down into this world to transform. And that's why we have both of these tracks. On the one hand, every mitzvah we say, put my mind aside, put my feelings aside. God, I'm yours, whatever you want. I transcend myself. I'm committed to you. And then we come to the understanding, and if I'm committed to you, therefore I'm committed to your goal of transformation. What does that transformation look like? I got to understand, I got to feel, I got to connect with it. It's got to make sense to me. It's got to be something that I can relate to. It's personal to me. It's meaningful to me. And that's one leads to the other. The goal is not transcendence. The goal is transformation, but you need the transcendence in order to get to the transformation. I'll take questions. And then we will, I'll share the review sheet. So let me just unmute, give me a moment here. Remember, you're being unmuted, so if you've got noise in your background, please mute yourself. Okay, questions?
I have a question, Rabbi.
Yes.
Would you relate this to the age of 13 and transformation and expectations at what age and what phase?
Okay, so first of all, of course, when a child is at a very young age, they have to, when a child's at a very, very young age, they have to think about, you have to think about their education, and to, even though they're not old enough yet to take responsibility for their actions, they do need direction and education so that when they do become of age, they have the right upbringing and background in order for them to make good decisions. But as far as coming of age, and basically in Kabbalah, its understanding is that the maturity, which is the ability to really appreciate the implications of our actions, the meaning behind things. In other words, it's not the information, it's the significance of the information. So you can have a child and an adult both see something happen, and the child sees the same thing that the adult does, but is not affected in the same way by it because they don't necessarily understand the implications. Just to give a very primitive example, if a child picks up a gun and he shoots someone and kills somebody else, he knows what he's done, just like the adult knows what he's done. But understanding what the significance of that is, what does that mean that you've taken a life and the implications, a child may lack the maturity and the ability to take that information, to translate it in a way that's meaningful, that they can fully appreciate and understand the implications of their actions. And that's why we can't hold them as responsible. That in Kabbalistic language, it's the level of knowledge. Knowledge dot is the ability to take information that's abstract and personalize it, understand to make us feel a certain way, to understand the implications of our actions. And that's really comes at the age of 12, 13, according to Jewish tradition, where a person has enough of that capacity to understand the significance of the information, how to translate that information to something that is meaningful, and therefore we have to be held responsible for our actions because we understand the meaning of what we've done. As far as relates to our discussion today, these goals, these tracks are something that we have to teach children from a very young age. On the one hand, we want children to understand that there's a concept of authority or a concept of right and wrong, whether you understand it or you don't understand it. And this is what needs to be done. You don't tell your child, as I always say, you don't tell your child, you only have to do homework if you feel it's important and if you feel good about it and you feel very inspired. You say, no, this is the right thing. This is what you need to do. I'm the parent and I'm telling you, this is, you may not understand it at this point in your life, you may not appreciate it, but this is the right thing to do. They need to understand that concept of there is a right and wrong. And sometimes even if I don't understand, even if it doesn't make sense to me, I've got to be committed to it. At the same time, we want to educate children to understand and appreciate things. So both of those tracks start at a very young age and continue on throughout life, that both of those are aspects of our spiritual journey. Okay, any other questions? Okay, I'm going to share the review sheet now, and you can, of course, you can take pictures of it if you'd like. And let's see if I can get that up here. Okay, so you should be able to see it. Let me make it a little bit bigger if I can. I don't know if it's letting me do that today. One second. There we go. Kabbalah Cafe, lesson 296, transcend and transform. There are generally three types of commandments: logical laws, super-rational laws, and testimonial laws. Those are the three types that we spoke about. The Kabbalah says that this corresponds to three levels of God, which is what? In the world, transcending the world, and the essence of God. We spoke about how those three correspond to the other three. All commandments have all three aspects as they come and descend through all the levels. The differences are in emphasis. Generally, these categories call for two general approaches in our service. One is the simple super-rational commitment to fulfill the will. In other words, I don't have to understand. And number two, understanding and internalizing the reasons and the logic. It seems that the simple obeying is a higher expression of commitment and also a higher expression of selflessness. But Kabbalah explains that the ultimate goal is not to transcend our world, rather it is to transform our world. And for this, we need to understand and to be passionate about the truth. It's not good enough just to be committed. Commitment is not enough. We also need to understand and we have to be passionate, because that's how transformation takes place. At the same time, without experiencing the transcendent selflessness, we may lack the commitment to our mission to transform. So both aspects are critical to our mission. We need to transcend in order to transform. And that's why we have both tracks. Transcendence that says, God, I'm totally unconditionally yours. It's got nothing to do with what I understand and what I feel. I'm just here for you. That's on the one hand. At the same time, there also has to be the concept of the God as he is beyond our understanding, so we can also, let me just do this here a second. So we can also transform. Okay, thank you everyone for joining, and have a wonderful week.